Welcome back to another episode of the Executive Code Podcast. If you're new to our podcast, I hope you enjoy our content. And if you do, it would be great if you gave us a review and a 5-star rating, because by doing that, it reaches more and more people. If you want to find out more ways of how you can connect with us and find out more resources to help you on your journey, just head over to our website, www.paulwilliamdavis.com. And there's a whole load of different ways of how we can actually help you on your journey. I'm joined here with Nicole, and Nicole has another question that she wants to get answered. So Nicole, what have you got for us this week?
So Paul, I recently saw the term body doubling on LinkedIn. It simply means working in the presence of others, and it's said to increase productivity. It's just being in the same room with another person. You don't need to help or even say anything. So what do you think about the concept of body doubling, and does it really work?
First of all, I know I'm laughing when I respond to this question. The reason being, when I saw it coming through, first of all, I said, okay, is that to do with a stuntman when you're making a film or making a movie? I said, is that body doubling? So I had to Google it myself, to be honest with you, Nicole, because I'd never, ever heard the term before. My first mind, when I started reading the actual, okay, what is body doubling all about? I said, okay, so is there any science backing this up? And no, I couldn't find any science. So that was the one thing. But what I did find was that, okay, so body doubling is used for people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and it helps them to achieve more of what they want to achieve in a day or a week or a month. So it's having another person there with them to carry out different activities or different things. And that person can either be present just in the room with them or doing the activity with them. So that's my understanding of body doubling. But I did have a thought in relation, okay, so what are the actors that are in mind that are getting other people to play different parts or different roles in different movies? That was my first reaction. I'll be honest, and as I read down through it and what the definition of body doubling was, and I can understand how it can work for people that have been diagnosed with ADHD. I completely get that. And I can understand how for some people it can work for people like that and so on, or for other people anyway, in either a social or a business perspective. But what was in my mind as I was reading down the material is, this is pretty much just the exact same as an open plan office. So just think of it. If you're in an open plan office and you've got other people around you, meaning your colleagues, and they're not interacting with you as such because you're still doing your work, but it's still the feeling that you have other people around you. So therefore, you tend to be a little bit more productive. And whether that be, you can create that open plan office in a virtual environment whereby you're connecting on Zoom and you're not necessarily talking to each other, but they're there in the background and you're still doing the activities. There's still that kind of element of an open plan office, albeit that you're connected online through that way. You don't have to be in a Zoom meeting as in physically face-to-face talking to each other. It's more a case of you know that the other people are present on the Zoom meeting, and therefore now you're creating that body doubling effect. It's a very funny term, I have to say. But you're creating that body doubling effect in order to be more productive. But honestly, my first thoughts were around, no, this is exactly like just having an open plan office. So why don't we all just come back into having an open plan office and therefore achieve what we want to get? So that was my first initial reactions. The next thing that I came through for myself was that it literally just depends on the circumstances. For me, it just wouldn't work. Honestly, it would. I wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't do it because it would actually have a more of a negative impact for me in the work that I do and how I work and all that kind of things. So would I recommend it to everybody and anybody to try? I would recommend to try. And if you find it works for you, well, then do it. And life is all about that. I can't emphasize this enough. Life is just a game. And the more you bring the dynamics of playing a game to life, the more life is going to be easier for you. So what I mean by that is, try it. And if it works, works. Well, then great. And if it doesn't, well, then fine, move on to the next thing. And that's okay. You haven't lost anything per se. And you may have landed on something that's actually going to work for you. So that's one thing what I would say. For me, as somebody that's naturally introverted, we tend to want our own alone time. we tend to want to work things through in our own mind or in our own way, our own processes. So therefore, we tend not to want to be around other people. However, if you're more extroverted minded or more extroverted focused, you will want to think through things with other people. And that's where being around other people will actually help from that perspective. So, but look at it this way, body doubling for me, in another way of looking at it, would be, apart from being an open plan office kind of scenario, it's more around having accountability. So you can have accountability, or you can bring accountability into your life in multiple different ways, depending on what it is that you want to use it within, whether it be your career, your business, your life, your social environment, whatever it might be. So think of accountability from the point of view of having a coach or having a mentor or having somebody that you have a buddy system with, meaning you're partnered up with somebody and therefore you're joint accountability to each other. So that's another way of do we have to create a new term and call it body doubling, where in effect it's actually just a new term for something that we've been doing for many, many years, or centuries for that matter. So I don't think there's anything really new in it, to be honest with you, compared to what we're already naturally doing. Do you want to be around people that are, from my perspective, being an empath, I have to limit the number of people that I'm around because I'm picking up on their energy. So therefore, it's a case of you've got to be conscious of who are the people that you are having, for want of a better word, buddying up with or being a body double with. And therefore, being conscious of, okay, so who are the people that you want to have around you, because it could end up being more negative as opposed to being more productive in your life. They were literally just my initial thoughts as I saw the question coming through, Nicole.
Do you think it justifies employers who want their remote employees working online to have their cameras on while working from home? Because the concept of, body doubling supports some employers' view that employees are more productive when they're being watched.
It would, but it's not something I would advocate. Because the bottom line is, if you want somebody to do a job, you've got to build enough trust within the individual to actually do the job. And therefore, it actually says more about you as an employer than it does about the employees. So are there things that need to come into play? Because building trust is about building rapport, credibility, and reliability. So if you can't build trust with the individuals that are working within your company, one of those elements are falling down, meaning one of those pillars of building trust. So therefore, it's more about what needs to be done within the culture of the company as opposed to the individuals within the company. So would I advocate having cameras on just for the sake of having a camera because you want to spy on people and making sure that they're more productive? Honestly, it defeats the purpose. Is it to say that there are companies out there that are doing it? Of course there is, absolutely. But me personally, it's not something I would advocate. You've got to be able to trust the individuals to actually do the work that you're actually requiring them to do. And are there measures or are there things or systems or processes that can be built in order to make sure that the work is being done? Well, then, yeah, of course there is. But do you want somebody, let me answer the question. I'm not necessarily asking you, Nicole, the question. I'm asking people even to think about the question. But if you have a comment on this, absolutely bring it in. Is it more important that somebody works 9 to 5 every single day, each hour, and produces X, as opposed to somebody that could work, say, 3 hours of that day and still produce the same output? Which is actually more important? The fact that they stay and working 9 to 5 all those hours, or is the output more important? And that's the fundamental question that you want to ask. And therefore, how could you increase that output, as opposed to when people start to remove that equation of time equals output, now the dynamics of how you run your business completely shifts and completely changes for the better. Time does not equal output. If you're a production machine and therefore you're a manufacturing machine and you're producing widgets and the machine can only produce 100 widgets per minute, well, then that's fine. Now time equals output for a machine, but we're not machines. You are human beings. So therefore, how can you harness the best of a human being within the business or within yourselves as an individual and get the best output from those individuals? And that's the fundamental question you want to ask. So are there different ways of how you can bring that about? Yeah, of course there are. If buddying up or buddy doubling or body doubling is the term to be used, this new term that people are coming out with. If that's something that's going to work, well then yeah, try it and see if it works. But I think those things have already been around in different ways or different formats.
I think some companies are still very focused on how long employees stay at work. So, I know I've heard of companies where people are done with their work, their output by like say 4 p.m. But because it's not 5 yet, they're not, I mean, this was before the pandemic, mostly, but they don't leave the office just because they are paid to be there until at least 5 or 6 or 7, right? And so they're just there, hanging out, not doing anything productive at all, whether it's work or outside of work, because they're physically there. So with work from home, now without being in the actual office, they get done with work early. They're more productive because, they know that when they get done with work early, they can go and do something else that they like or that's not related to work. And so that's one point of contention with, the return to work and employers wanting people back in the office, right? Because they know that once people get done with work, they're not going to wait around for more work. They're going to be doing something else like laundry, whether it's laundry, errands, or, something creative or their hobbies during work time because they're working from home, right? And no one's going to be looking at them and waiting to make sure that they're only going to leave the office at 6 p.m. And there's also this concept of virtual body doubling. I'm not sure if you saw that. So it's platforms where they pair you up with another person, a complete stranger who is also having trouble getting things done on their own. So I'm not sure if it really works in that sense because it's a complete stranger. You have no connection to them. They're not even your coworker or your friend or anything. And so it's just strange, just, having two people look at each other over camera while you're working. And I'm not sure if it really works.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know whether it does or not. And hence the reason why one of the first things, is there any scientific research that's actually gone into actually assess whether it's working or not? I can understand it can work for certain people, and that's okay. So it may work in some circumstances, and it may work for some people. It's trying to discern for yourself as regards, would it actually be working for you or whoever else it might be. But going back to one of the points that you said, in the sense of, there are employees that they could get their work done by 4 o'clock and then they spend that other hour literally just hanging around. They will do that for a certain period of time. And therefore now what starts to kick in is their work becomes more meaningless. And therefore now they don't want to be in the company anymore because now they just see that I'm being rewarded by staying for hours, 9 to 5, as opposed to the output or the work that I'm creating. When you harness those individuals, now what's going to happen is they'll move on to another company. But as an employer, if you harness those individuals and now you can get more work out of them, but being rewarded for the work, meaning the output, as opposed to the number of hours that they put in. That's a very, very different dynamic that you can bring within the business itself. But as I said, it goes back to the same point. It's rewarding people for the output as opposed to time does not equate to the value of somebody within the company. It's what is the value that they're bringing to the company, meaning what's the results or what's the output that they're producing for the company. That's what's of value.
And oftentimes when people complete their work too early because, say they're really good at their jobs and they're really efficient and they finish their work earlier than expected, what they get as a reward is more work from their employers. And so, working in the office, if your employer sees that you're done with work, you're not doing anything, they're probably going to find something for you to do, right? Because they're paid for you to be there for however many hours. And so with work from home, you don't have that micromanaging. And so when you're done with work, your employers may not necessarily give you more work just to fill up your time, if that makes sense.
It does absolutely make sense. The way I look at it is that if you take on more work, well, then that's the more value that you're bringing to the company. And therefore, the more value you're bringing to the company, the more you should be rewarded. Now, I'm saying should because it depends on the individual as regards whether they want to pursue that route or whether they just want to, because this gets back to one of the episodes that we recorded before, which it gets back to your own self-care and making sure that you're being rewarded and what you prioritize and what you want to be gain from the employment. So I was one of the fastest individuals in every single company I worked within. I was one of the fastest individuals to be promoted to higher levels within the company because what I copped on very, very quickly, even though I was very young, and one of the common things that will be said about me by my senior managers will be, you're the youngest to be promoted. And they would even have a question mark over whether they could promote me because I was the youngest within the company being promoted. But I copped on very, very quickly from the perspective of the more value that I create, but I pursued the value in exchange for being looked after in terms of remuneration and promotion and career progression. So the more value that you can bring to a company, well, then the more you are expected to be remunerated for. Now, are there companies out there that you can bring massive, massive value to the company, but not be remunerated? Yeah, of course there is. But that gets back to you being in control of your own life and your own destiny and what it is that you want to have in your life, and therefore bring about and have those conversations with the employer to explain the value that you bring, and therefore in exchange, what are you being rewarded for in terms of the value that you're bringing.
And I know you said, there's no scientific explanation for body doubling. One theory I read online is that the body double acts as a mirror. So like a calming reflection, which could say that the person is focused and concentrating. So if you see someone being focused and super concentrated on work, you tend to want to replicate that and be like them. But, that also limits yourself to your focus to the level of the other person's focus, right?
You're bringing it down to the lowest common denominator. So what you'll also find in a company whereby if there's somebody unproductive within the company and it's not being managed within the company, well, then everybody else will fall to that level of productivity or unproductivity, if you want to look at it that way. So everybody always comes back down to the lowest level of common denominator within the company. So that literally refers to that aspect as well. So the more you kind of work on how can you bring the team up, well, then that's where now you're increasing the level of productivity within the company. But one thing I'd say, which kind of strikes me from the perspective, and again, it's something that we touched on one of the previous episodes. The more companies start to embrace and look at how can we bring the unique individual to the business, the unique individual to the company, and what I mean by the unique, I mean the uniqueness of the individual, and that comes along with flexibility in how that uniqueness comes into play. But it's also the whole individual that's coming within the company itself and the real individual in the company. Then the more you're actually going to get out of individuals or employees that work with you within the company. The more employers try to hang on to the old way of being in terms of having robots within the company and everybody being the same and operating exactly the same way as everybody else, as opposed to the ability of an individual, well, then that's where they're going to lose out. So there is a transition, has been happening for a number of years, but it's actually going to accelerate over the next number of years. And that's going to be all around how can we bring the unique abilities and the uniqueness of individuals within the company for the betterment of the output or the outcome or the purpose of that company. And that's you're going to see that happening over the next number of years and accelerate over the next number of years. So let's not hang on to the old ways of doing things and having everybody within the company being the same as everybody else within the company. Good. So we've given you some food for thought. As I said, it was a term I never heard before. And as I said, even every single time I think of that term, it's kind of an unusual term. As I said, I thought it was to do with actors within the movie. So look it up, guys. Google it for yourself, body doubling. It may be the new term that might be the hit from business coaches and business consultants around the world, but you definitely won't be hearing it from me from that perspective because I have a completely different view on it altogether. Try it. If it works for you, well, then that's absolutely brilliant. I'm not saying do or don't. I'm saying try it for yourself and then see whether it works. But until next time, I wish you every success.